Now onto our speaker and the person who would also be delivering the full training on the 6th and 20th of June, Jerry Koch-Gonzalez. So Jerry has been a trainer of sociocracy for many decades, and he founded Sociocracy for All. And he's been a facilitator, and he's also created the co-housing association in the US, which Jerry might be talking more about later on. He's also an author of 2 books. Who Decides, Who Decides? That's the latest one. And Many Voices, One Song. Thank you.
But I did not write Who Decides, Who Decides. Ted Rau wrote that.
Ted. Okay. So I guess, Jerry, I just want to thank you very much for coming in and training us. We're very pleased to have you again. Over to you, Jerry.
Okay. Well, thank you, Jean-Mathieu, for welcoming me here. And it's great to see David Somerville, who was part of the team that invited me to Scotland a couple of years ago. Kimmy Scott and Eva Schoenfeld. I don't know if they're still around with SCAN. But yeah, it was a great team, put together great workshop, and I loved being able to be in Scotland. It was my only time I've been there. So I was love to someday return. So just to say maybe a couple more things about me. Yeah, I've been a lifelong social change activist. Got my start really around organizing against nuclear power, seeing that as a concentration of power and wealth as opposed to solar and renewables that would distribute. So that was back in the 1970s. We're still fighting the good fight. So here we are. Even nuclear power seems to be having a resurgence. So if we don't have oil from Russia, then we have to have nuclear power, right? Or gas from Russia. Anyway. And my story about being an activist was that I was part of a group that worked with nonviolent social change, and that's how we operated against, in doing all the protesting that we did. And also what we did was training activists, which is how I fell in love with training. So I'm still doing that today. We lived in cooperative households, and I still live in a housing community now. And we did, let's see, training, and then we did training. Did I say that already? Yeah. So, when I left there and wound up living in the co-housing community that I'm in, I kept on teaching consensus because that's what I was teaching at the time. And our community operated by consensus, and then we found out the problems with it and how much of a struggle that was. And that's kind of what led me when I encountered sociocracy, went, this answers some of my questions. So that's what we'll talk about today. So without further ado, I'm going to do a slide deck. So that's kind of like sit back, relax, enjoy the show. So, sociocracy, and here's kind of the various things we're going to talk about. But sociocracy, basically a peer governance system based on consent. So we'll talk about organizational structure with circles, how we link them, decisions by consent, and feedback. That's kind of the territory we'll cover. So, organization basics. What do we do? What do we actually do? We need to understand that and be clear about that, right? Why do we do it? So this is kind of what's our vision, what's our sense of mission that drives us to do what we actually do? Who decides? And how do they decide? So those are the elemental questions that if we have an organization, we need to understand the answers to. And how we answer those questions will hugely impact the work that we do and how we're organized and what its long-term impact and meaning are. How are decisions going to be made? We can make them by majority rule so that the few or the winners of the majority get to rule. It's kind of the struggle that we are in the United States, where I'm coming from, where we have majority rule, and it keeps flipping from the Republicans to the Democrats. And because it's majority rule, somebody who's in the minority, even less than Democrat or more left of Democrat, doesn't really have much of a voice. Autocracy, where the voice of the ruler or the boss gets to say so. Consensus, all voices matter in theory, but in practice, it's often some voices matter more than others. If you've been in consensus groups, like especially when they're large, you've got a group of 30 people in the room and a good facilitator's calling, I see a hand here, here, and here, and they get to speak. But the people who don't get called on don't get to speak. If you're shy, you don't speak up. The people who disagree with each other speak over and over and over again and try to get louder, because if you get louder, you can convince people, right? And then the alternative is consent, and that's what we'll share more about here. And what's the organizational structure? Do you have a vertical hierarchy, with layers that tell each layer telling the next layer down what to do? Or do you have no really clearly defined structure, the way many social change groups or community groups might be? It's like, hey, we're just all in this together, we'll just figure it out somehow. Or do you do what we call in sociocracy the circular hierarchy? Hierarchy based on function, not on people. And I'll explain more of that too as we go. And another question is, does the organization evolve? Is it sort of stagnant because feedback is limited? Or is it growing? Is it learning because it is receiving feedback and responding to that feedback? So those are the kind of questions that lead me into sociocracy. And just to break down that word, socio means those who associate together, and ocracy means governance. So sociocracy, governance by those who associate together. So governance by those who work together. And that's what leads us into the circle idea. We have a circle of people and we govern ourselves within that circle. So sociocracy, steering, it's an organizational approach to help organizations steer towards accomplishing what they want to do, their aim. And the three core elements are decision-making by consent, organizational structure with the linked circles that I'll be showing you, and continuous evolution by feedback, so you're not stagnant. So those are the kind of, for me, the three legs, the three elements, core elements of sociocracy. So we start with a group. You might come together, the group of founders or group of friends want to get something done, and they start figuring out what they want to do. You might start out as informal. You need to understand what's your aim. What do you want to do? And what's going to be the area of responsibility of your circle, of your particular team? Because as you grow, you wind up having other teams. So one team might be doing the social media, another team is organizing training, and a third team might be organizing actions. So different teams working with the overall aim of the organization have different domains, different areas of responsibility. And this becomes one of the issues of being clear that the domain of our circle doesn't overlap with the domain of the other circle. So communication becomes really important between these different working teams. And so you create a coordinating circle, or what we sometimes call a general circle, where you have the leaders and delegates, who are chosen by consent, of those different teams meeting together to communicate and making sure that there isn't overlap in responsibilities, that there's clear communication and coordination between the teams in the work to achieve the aim. And once you've got a group that's kind of managing the day-to-day work of the organization, you might start forgetting the bigger picture, the long term. Because when we work, we often are just like, okay, what's the urgent, this week's actions, this week's activities? But you also need to step back every once in a while and think about the long term. And that's where the board of directors or the mission circle comes in, that thinks about the long-term aspect of things. So where are we going in 5 years? What is the meaning of the political shifts that have just happened. What was going on pre-Brexit to post-Brexit? Those are kind of big questions that you then have to reflect on and understand what the impact of that on our activity. And then this organizational structure is like a fractal. It can keep expanding because you can have a subcircle for each of these teams and more subcircles. And one of the interesting things, I wish we could do this when I've done this in person, is I think I did this when I was in where was it, Glasgow for the workshop that I did a couple of years ago, is to have everybody stand up and set themselves up into small groups. And then identify with the small groups kind of someone who would just label as a leader and delegate. And they stood and formed their circles, but then they also connected with each other with if you make the central circle, as you can see here, with the leaders and delegates of the subcircles. And if everybody holds hands within the circle, and the leader of one circle is holding hands perhaps with a delegate of another circle, you can then step back, and see that you are still one big circle. You're still all connected. I don't know if I can explain this very clearly with words, but you have to experience this, and maybe you can do that within your own, follow-up trainings, in-person work that you do. And I share this particular screen because I just wanted to give that image of it's not just little groups doing their own thing, and it's not just one big group. It's this combination of the small and the whole, always working together. And this always possible communication from the most grassroots groups to the most kind of central, if you will, the general circle or the mission circle. Okay, what is this? Every circle has roles. And by circle, again, I mean a small team with a particular aim. So every circle would have a leader or a coordinator. Sometimes people don't like the word leader because it's too scary. It's too much power over reminder. So we use words like, coordinator. And a delegate. So the leader and the delegate serve both in their home circle, and they also serve in the next more wider perspective abstract circle, the general circle or some other circle. So the leader and delegate are members of two circles, their home circle and the next circle on a more abstract level. So that's how they're communicating, in a sense, both from the center out and from the outside to the center, or from the top down and the bottom up. I try to avoid sometimes using the words top down and bottom up because then they get misunderstood again as those with power and those without power. I mean it more grassroots level is, at the grassroots, whereas the clouds are up in the sky. It's the clouds do not have power over the grass, right? They're just different levels of frame. Other roles that get played in circles are the facilitator, who does not have to be the same person as the leader, and the secretary, someone, who's the person who's taking the notes, managing the administration of the group, keeping the history of the decisions that are being made. And then those are just those four roles are in a sense, the process roles, if you will, to keep the circle functioning. But then there are all the other operational roles, whatever's needed. If it's a social media circle, then it's like, okay, Emma's got TikTok, and Fran has got Instagram, and Jean-Matthew's got LinkedIn, and and so on. You might each have your own roles of the particular area where you pay attention. Okay. Here's an organizational structure example. This is where I live, the Pioneer Valley Cohousing community. We've been here for 27 years, and we adopted Sociocracy about 9 years ago. And we created this particular structure. So we have our coordinating circle, that's made up of leaders and delegates of the Plants Animal Land Circle. So maybe I should step back and say, so Pioneer Valley Cohousing Community, meaning we have a certain amount of land here, and we've got 32 houses. We are self-managed. So we don't have any company running anything. We do our own snow plowing, our own lawn mowing, our own collecting dues, etc. And so to manage ourselves, we have these different units. One, Plants, Animal, Landscape, takes care of the orchard, the gardens, all the land. Another one's called Buildings and Grounds, and their responsibility is the roofs and the main building and the roads and the tractor, things like that. And then the Common House Circle is responsible for the use and the policies within our main building, where we have meals and we have, a kids' room and ping pong table and stuff like that. And then Community Life, which is one I serve on, takes care of all the kind of people-related things, under which we have a number of sub-circles. Like we have a fun circle that organizes a birthday party every month. We have Care and Counsel that deals with conflict and support for people who might be sick. We have membership that deals with incoming and outgoing of members, etc. This a little bit more complicated picture. This is Sociocracy for All, my other organization. And you can't really probably see all the little detail, but here's the mission. Whoop, let's see. Back up. This purple thing right here is our mission circle. And there's another purple is our general circle. And then we have like 4 main departments. One is the content circle, which is like I'm delivering training to you, and that's coming from the training circle. So we have content production, training, outreach. Then we have this other department called ecosystems, and that is application of sociocracy in different areas, like sociocracy and cooperatives, sociocracy and permaculture, sociocracy and nonprofits, sociocracy and intentional communities. And then we have another set of circles, which is the international. And we don't have a SOFA UK or SOFA Scotland yet, someday. But we do have a unit in Denmark and Sweden that are part of SOFA Scandinavia. We have SOFA France, we have SOFA Spanish-speaking division, SOFA Italia, SOFA Brazil. So there's a number of different units, and their aim also is to bring sociocracy to their language and country. And they wind up replicating the same ecosystem things of sociocracy in Italy for intentional communities and so on. Eventually, this is all still growing. So that's I think all I really want to say about organizational structure. It's been a long time since I've seen how SCAN was organized, and I don't assume everybody here is in part of SCAN, but I'm sure you have your own organizational structure, and some of you have your place in it, or some of you may be interested in thinking about how do you structure the organizations that you are wanting to be part of or you are already part of. How do you do that so that you can support every voice mattering rather than cutting out certain sets of voices? Okay. So next piece I want to talk a little bit about is meetings. So we have developed kind of a standard set of how to run a meeting. And we've got, we use Google Drive and documents to standardize this kind of stuff. I always start with an opening round, which, we, on a limited basis, we don't really do in a training like this. But if we're a group of 5 or 6 or 7, we start with the opening round. How are you on arriving at this meeting? That way I can share if my cat, who's my company for the last 10 years, died, last night, I can talk about that. Or if I'm really just so disturbed by, the latest atrocity, the children killed or Ukraine war, I can share how I'm disturbed by that. Or if I just had a baby, I can share my celebration about that. Or if I'm really tense about an item on the agenda, I can share about that. So that's opening round. How are you arriving here so that we can be present with each other? The next bit, and I say that because to me it's really important that we are not just a decision-making machine, right? We are human beings. The kind of world we want to create is one where people matter. So let's demonstrate that right off the bat as we come together in a group, that we matter to each other. All right, the next little piece is an acronym, admin, A for attendance. Are we all here? Oh, the secretary's not here. We need somebody else to do the minutes, or somebody can quick text, Alan to make sure that he shows up, etc. How long is the meeting for? Is it 60 minutes, 90 minutes? Oh, I need to leave early, so, clarity about that. Anything left over from last meeting that needs to be, attended to? Did we, is there any kind of debate about what we consented to last time? So that's minutes. Information. Oh, gee, there's going to be a SOFA member somewhere in Scotland going to be doing these weekend 4-day things. So you might want to connect with Shayla. I'll say more about that at the very end because it's actually true. And when's the next meeting going to be? Are we clear about that? Oh, 3 of us can't make that meeting because of X. Okay, we need to change the date. So always set your date of your meeting before it ends, at the beginning rather than at the end, because by the end somebody will already have left and now you're stuck with having to do when is good or doodle polls or anything else like that to figure out when you can meet. All right, so that's the opening and the admin. Then comes the agenda body itself, which always starts with consent. Consent to the agenda, because somebody may have planned the agenda. Maybe Jerry planned the agenda. And here is what I think we should be talking about and how much time we should spend on it. But now it's time for all of us in the group to say, looks good, Jerry. Thanks for preparing the agenda. We consent to it. Or, no, wait. There's something really important. That last item on the agenda should go sooner because perhaps we'll run out of time. And if we run out of time, it's going to be absolutely critical that we will have dealt with that topic. So we might rearrange, etc. So the group takes ownership of the agenda by that consent. It's no longer Jerry's agenda. It's the group's agenda. And what's in the agenda? So different elements. We've sort of found that the agenda always consists of one or more of these 3 items. Reports to understand. Somebody did a little bit of research and is just reporting out. Here's the information. Are there any questions? And you do a round of questions. That's it. Another thing might be to explore an issue. Somebody might have prepared, here's kind of this issue. Any questions? Round of questions. Okay, now reactions. What do we think about this issue? What should we be doing with this? And it's just an exploration, not a decision making. And the third kind of item is when you're actually trying to make a decision. Maybe there's a proposal on the table and you want to understand the proposal, explore your reactions to it, and make a decision. Having gone through your body of your meeting agenda, then the next to last piece is updating the backlog, or you might call it the bike rack or the parking lot, of what do we need to keep in mind for future meetings. Something new arose in a discussion and somebody said, let's put that issue in the backlog for a future meeting. And so it gets posted in your list of backlog items from which people can then consider how to organize a future agenda. And then closing round. And this is an evaluation piece. This is one of those moments where continuous evolution through feedback of how was this meeting? How did we do on our process? How did we do on our interpersonal connections with each other? How did we do on accomplishing what we were aiming to do in this meeting? So doing a round of that feedback so you can improve into the future. So that's the standard meeting. And as I said a couple of times, I've said the word rounds. This is what we do a lot. the importance of a round, which means, just literally going around the room or going around the Zoom and hearing everyone's voice. Rounds are the essential tool for supporting that every voice matters. So it's very easy when you have a smaller group to start forgetting about it, or if you have a large group, oh, we can't do rounds. So notice that once you stop doing rounds, you are really challenging the possibility of all voices mattering. So when I work with large groups, like this is just a training, but if we're an organized group, I'd want to break you up into small groups so that we can, have those discussions or explorations in the smaller groups where your voice can actually be heard. When we do the consent round, it might be that somebody says, oh, I don't really agree. And so then you have to process that until they come to a consent. So we'll talk more about that. Here is the consent process. A proposal is presented, and then you do a round of clarifying questions. You want to make sure that everyone understands the proposal. It's very tempting to jump in right away with opinions. But as soon as you jump in with opinions, you've maybe shortcutted your understanding or other people's understanding of what was being presented. So first of all, make sure that everybody understands the proposal. Okay, I hear no further questions. Great. Now let's do a quick reaction round. What do you like about this proposal? What don't you like about it? And it's meant to be a quick reaction, not an extended debate. We want to move through the round of reactions. It might be 2 rounds, but never, usually I've hardly ever done more than 2 rounds. It's usually just 1, sometimes a second. Sometimes a second because there's enough debate or enough tension about the proposal that we need to clarify some more or maybe look at some directions for how we might adopt, how we might change it. The third round is the consent round. So, yes, in Zoom we do a lot of the thumbs up, thumbs down, sideways. When you're in person, you can, do the I consent or I have no objection. And if there are objections, then you want to hear the objections and hear them all first before you start debating them. Make sure then you want to do the same thing, making sure you understand the objections, then have a reaction round to the objections, and then see if you can come up with some ways to resolve the objections. And about objections. This is, to me, has been one of those key things to understand about how do we move forward when we have groups that have all sorts of different opinions. That we all, on any issue or any solution to any issue, we may have our preferences. I'd like, well, I won't go into the details, but I might have a preference in, if we have a set of options, I might have my preference. But I'm willing to accept a range of, I'm willing to accept a number of other options. Maybe I should give an example. Let's say doing about ranked choice elections. I don't know how familiar you are with that, but say we're going to do a selection process, and I'm just thinking about people, and I'm going, oh, my preference would be Emma. But within my range of tolerance is Lizanne and Ian. They'd be fine. I don't think there would be any harm to our group. They probably do just fine. Oh, but if David's going to be the leader of this group, oh, I don't know about David. I think that might be some problems, and so I might have an objection because I had some experience in the past. So it's clarity about what are we willing to work with, because if we stick with our preferred choice, my preferred choice is Emma, but Alette's preferred choice is Fran, and Fran's preferred choice is Ian, and Ian's preferred choice is David, and if everybody sticks to their preferred choice, it becomes really hard to make a decision. But if we start going to what can I work with, you know, what choices do we have that I don't have a worry about it doing harm to the organization? That's what I mean by range of tolerance. So the phrases that you may have heard that are very popular within sociocracy are, is this safe enough to try? Is this good enough for now? If we decide that Lizanne is going to be the leader of this group, but we have some concerns, we say, okay, then let's give Lizanne a 3-month term instead of a 3-year term. So in 3 months, we can go, okay, are we still going? Are things going okay? Is there any change that we could be making? Any feedback that we can give to Lizanne to support her and improve her capacities? Or are we really kind of in trouble and maybe we need to rethink who should be in this role? See on the screen here, I've written down some of the things that you said of the basis. Clear in their approach, that they're willing, outgoing, able to articulate, succinct, listens and understands well, remains calm and collected, confident, can reflect views of the group, someone who picked up on others' views, built on other people's ideas. Is there anything else that jumps out at you that you would say, oh, I would add this to the list? It's a good enough list? Give me a thumbs up if this is a good enough list. All right, see, this is good enough. All right, so now what you see up below is a list of names, your names. This is no, this is what I thought I was going to do originally, right? We have Mick and Helen. Come on, come. While I'm writing this, I want you to think of who among the 5 of you, not me, would you nominate as the reporter? Looking at the qualities and having maybe some of you already know each other, I don't know, but just off of the first impressions you've had meeting each other. There's no right or wrong, there's no best person. It's just who would you be moved to nominate? Okay, so think among the 5 of you and show me your hand when you've got somebody. Again, this is going to be good enough for now, safe enough to try. So, all right. So now I'm going to do a round, and I'm going to ask you to say who you nominate, and why. What led you to nominate them? Keep it fairly brief. Oh, let me stop for a moment. You can nominate yourself. So that might change who your nomination is if that's something that you want to rethink for a moment. So I just want to give you that space to rethink if you want to happen to nominate yourself. So in this case, let's say I am the current facilitator. If I was really part of this group, I would have also nominated, but I didn't want to do that, because I'm the trainer in this context. But if I was part of this group, I would be a participant, even though I was facilitating. So having heard what I heard, I will propose Lizanne for her smile, her confidence and brief and clarity, picking up on other things that people said, and that everybody's a lot of people's confidence in Lizanne. So now I'm going to do a consent round. Are you willing to have Lizanne be the reporter for this group? Or maybe in the context of time, I'll just say thumbs up if you consent to Lizanne being the reporter.
So what happens if Lizanne says absolutely?
And then I ask, I would usually ask Lizanne last. So Lizanne, would you be willing to be the reporter? And Lizanne gets to say yes or no. Do you have a thumbs up or thumbs down, Lizanne? Sort of in between? Yeah. So if I was going to I'm going to stop here with this exercise. But if I was going to take a little bit more time, I would say, oh, okay, Lizanne, tell us what's leading you to sit in the middle. Actually, why don't you tell us what's leading you to sit in that middle, not quite consenting, but not quite saying no. So if you knew that you could have Emma supporting you, and so you see what I just did also is You know,
Yeah.
what would shift the I'm not so sure to a yes? And oh, if you had support from Emma, oh yes, then I would say yes. Now Lizanne is ready to consent. So everybody can turn their videos back on if you want. I'll take some questions here, and then we'll do a little bit of just the last few slides to just share sort of future things, or another comment you want to make, or a reflection like, oh, this was interesting, this selection process. You can also comment on the selection process.
Gary, just while you're looking for that, in our little group, there was questions about what is this about objections, and what's particular about objection around in sociocracy.
On what basis would you object? Is that, or what's the?
Yeah. Well, what's the whole deal?
Yeah. So remember that I said about continuous evolution through feedback? One of the implications of that statement is that we want to try things and learn from our experience, right? So the sooner we can try something and learn from it, the sooner we can adapt our plans given that experience. So when we looking at objections, I'm looking to see, is there a concern that harm would be done to our ability to work towards our aim? If I see if I see harm possible here, then I would want to object, and I would state what I think the concern is, and then we can do a round on, am I alone in thinking about this concern, or is it other people reflect, oh yeah, that's serious, and then based upon that objection, we might drop the proposal, or more likely we try to figure out some way to amend it so that we can have an experience that we can learn from. So again, a policy, a plan, can we shorten the term? Instead of a 3-year policy, a 3-month policy? Can we change something in particular? Oh, if Emma supports Lizanne, does that make it a yes? So what amendments can we make that allow us to have an experience from which we can learn? Safe enough to try, good enough for now. That's kind of the basic. Does that answer your question, David? So one basic frame of sociocracy is ideally we're working in small enough groups where we can have dialogue with each other. And they're also consistent groups. It's not like drop-ins. It doesn't work to make decisions with a drop-in culture, because then, oh, I hear that group is making a decision about something that I'm really, I don't like what they're going to do, so I'm going to drop into their meeting and object. That's not the way it would work. You need to have ongoing relationship. So like the group of 5 that was in the fishbowl, they would have an ongoing relationship with each other. They know each other's quirks and concerns, and a sense of what might somebody object to, etc. So you have a relationship. It's relationship-based decision-making and dialogue-based decision-making, hearing what everybody's thinking. So if you need to make a quick decision, then ideally you have a meeting, an emergency meeting on Tuesday, 9 o'clock at night, because that's the only time you can meet after everything else, and you do the best you can. And who wasn't there? Then you might try to contact them or send them a text or something, or a call and saying, hey, we're making this decision. This is what we want to do. If you really have an objection, get back to us within 3 hours or 6 hours, by tomorrow morning. Do what you can to include the absent people. But otherwise, if it feels like an emergency, like an urgent decision, go ahead and make it. And then at the next meeting that you do have, you can reflect back on, was that a valid emergency? How do we feel about the decision we made? How do we feel about the process we went through? So that you are always being accountable if you're going to do something different than usual. So you don't create kind of this back door to power over decisions ooh, I hear Emma's not going to be at Tuesday's meeting. Let's make a decision while she's not there, because we know she would oppose it, but all the rest of us would want to say yes. So you don't want to create options like that. Which also reminds me to say something about, I heard council culture, and when I hear council, I'm assuming like U.S. context, town council. Is that what does council mean to you?
So cancel, in other words, chasing people on social media and things like that.
Cancel culture. Okay.
Horrid.
Yeah. Well, what I wanted to say, I guess it applies in both directions, is you're coming together on the basis of a shared aim. And that's your biggest safety marker, in a sense. If you argue a lot, it might be that you do not have a shared aim, and you might be better off being two different groups. So when we get together, the narrower the aim, the more, like this is, like if you are all climate activists who are like passionate about it, there's a good chance you can have a shared aim around some of the stuff that you're doing. But if you take a much broader perspective, like six people at random in the United States, who knows what shared aim would 6 random people have? It may be very difficult to make decisions because we don't have a shared aim. There was a question about, well, I'll take your questions. Helen and then Mick.
Yeah, I was thinking about I'm trying to think of real world applications which are particularly hard. So what about a high risk option? Like, let's say, should we invest in a major capital project? Should we renovate that that ruined building in the nearby village and turn it into our second? It's high risk, possibly high reward, but it needs a yes/no answer. So then you're down to individual people's risk perception, I would say. So you can provide them with all the information, but people will come up with they will understand and they'll digest it, but the decision they explore it, but the decision they might make might be based on their personal risk perception. So what happens when you've been round and round and round and 1 or 2 people say, I think this is the wrong thing, I think this could sink the organization, but the other 10 people say, no, we're confident it's worth it won't sink the organization. Do you ever do a vote, or do you have to get consent?
Well, first, I definitely would aim not to do a vote, aim to try to do consent.
Mm-hmm.
This might be a clarity. Well, okay, the 8 of us want to move ahead with this, and 2 of us will back out. We don't want to be part of this project. This is one of those, do we have the same shared aim? The whole risk factor thing that you bring up, I think, is very interesting. I had not run into it at all until COVID hit. But COVID split many of us in unexpected ways. People who have shared such a tremendous amount of shared values, but the risk issue, like my neighbor's like, totally risk averse, whereas another neighbor is completely reckless, and like, it was very, very tough making governmental policy about how to open or close our common house, or masks or not. Same thing that, entire governments have had to decide. We were a government too. And that risk averse, risk tension was, was really challenging. And the thing that I came back to around the community aspect of whether we open up the common house or not is to try to keep coming back to, why are we here? We're here because we want to be a community. And so what's most important is that we keep talking to each other. It's even more important that we really listen to each other than whether or not we open the common house, those things. And I sort of similarly, I'd say to you, if you're a climate action group and you need to decide whether to risk that building or not, it's like, why are we here? When do we choose to take risks and when do we not? And let's make a judgment call. I don't know that there is an answer to that. We do, the sociocracy has what I call the top circle problem. Like, what happens, because whenever a sub-circle can't make a decision, it goes to the next and the next to the next, and might go all the way up to the board. And how does the board decide if they're trying to make decisions by consent? And you have to make a decision. Then you need some kind of fallback. And there's a couple of fallbacks. One is, do you decide to have a vote? supermajority, or there are other kinds of ways. And I know we're just about
Interesting. Thank you.
Okay. I'm gonna keep my, oh, yep, we're over time. I've got the time, but I want to take these two, and then I want to just share a couple of things about what next. So Mick and Emma.
Okay, very quickly. Can you say something about the reasons and the distinction in the roles between when you have a delegate and a leader who represent a circle at the higher level?
Sure.
Please, thank you.
The leader's function is to support their circle in doing the work towards accomplishing the aim. So that's kind of their main role. Serving on their kind of broader or higher level circle, they also are responsible for bringing information from that circle to their home circle. The delegate's role is fairly simple, is to bring their perspective from their home circle to their parent circle. So it's a two-way street, which creates a greater sense of integrity and honesty. Because if you ask me as the director, as the leader of a group, how's your group doing, Jerry? Doing great, But then Emma, who's the delegate, might say, well, we're actually struggling about some stuff. And so it opens up, more likelihood of honesty and trust. And both leader and delegate make decisions by consent in both circles. The biggest part for me is about prevention. And that has to do with the continuous evolution through feedback. If you're giving feedback at the end of a meeting, you can say, hey, this is like the third meeting that we've had, and, Jerry just keeps talking a lot, and it's kind of frustrating that not everybody gets as much airtime. When Jerry talks, it's like 3 minutes straight, and when anybody else talks, it's like 30 seconds, and that, so I'm having a hard time with that. So you start saying things like that, and so you're giving feedback, and hopefully people adapt with the feedback that is being shared. There's a couple of other elements like performance reviews, what we call circle review, policy reviews, all sorts of ways to keep looking at what we're doing and be conscious of it. Aside from all of that kind of preventive things and naturally, if you're doing rounds, everyone's voice is being heard. There's a lot of prevention in that aspect. But we have a tendency in Sociocracy for All to bring in a lot of NVC, nonviolent communication, as a particular tool that we appreciate. It just sharpens our ability to hear each other. Because so let me see if I'm hearing, like just reflecting back, let me see if I'm hearing what you've just said, see if I understand it right. So that little practice of just even that reflective listening is key. When people object, oh my God, Emma objected. Now the whole project is ruined because she objected. All right, Emma, tell us more about your objection. We want to understand the objection. So we're inviting the objection as opposed to feeling like the project is ruined by it. We have lots of different kinds of training. So here you see there's a beginner trainings that are based on just open live classes. This beginner workshop is what we plan to do through SCAN, the 6 hours worth, 2-3 hour sessions, doing what we've just done, but much bigger, more practice. Then there's a video-led courses, which are also, I think maybe we're going to make that as an offering to people in SCAN if they want to do that. That means like 4 to 7 people getting together 4 times at your own schedule, and going through some steps that are set up for you on these videos. And then there's more advanced facilitation classes, and there's also nonviolent communication classes. All of these are visible on the sociocracyforall.org website. And then there is books like Many Voices, One Song, Who Decides, Who Decides. There's just so much stuff on the sociocracyforall.org website. Tons of videos, tons of articles. Just you can spend hours and hours and hours there. And I don't have enough information about this, but in Strachwollochfin, I don't know how to say these words, in July, August, September. There's a SOFA member named Shayla Massey who's going to be kind of in residence at this place, holding these 2-day in-person sociocracy trainings, 4 to 8 people. And if you're interested in that, we didn't have the detail, but if you're interested in that, you can contact Shayla at this at the Shayla Massey at sociocracyforall.org, or back to me and I'll try to get in touch. Somebody named Susan, who I don't know if somebody knows, is organizing this. So it's just like, oh, it's something in Scotland, so somebody may be interested. And then of course the 2 3-hour sessions that you've already planned to do.